In the end, when we'd made our last sweep through the scorched lanes and charred lumps of houses, looking for survivors and counting the dead, we stood together in a mournful assembly to hear the tally. It was known that 12 persons were dead, 6 of them elderly men and women, and 4 of them children. More than 100 were injured, with burns and cuts. Many of them were serious wounds. About 600 houses were lost, 1/10 of the slum. Johnny Cigar was translating the figures for me. I was listening to him with my head close to his, but watching Qasim Ali's face as he read from his hastily prepared list of the dead and injured. When I turned to look at Johnny, I found that he was crying. Prabaker pushed through the crowd to join us, just as Johnny told me that Raju was one of those who died in the fire. Raju, with the sad, honest, friendly face, the man who'd invited me to live in the slum. Dead. Damn lucky. Prabaker summed up cheerfully when Qasim Ali had called the tally. His round face was so blackened with soot that his eyes and teeth seemed almost supernaturally bright. Last year, in the last big fire, a full 1/3 of the Jopadpati was burning up. 1 house from every 3 houses. More than 2,000 houses gone. Coloss. More than 40 people dying also. 40. It's too many, Lynn, let me tell you. This year is a very lucky fire. And our houses are safe also. Bhagwan have blessings on our brother, Raju. Shouts from the edge of the somber crowd drew our attention, and we turned to see one of the search teams pushing their way through to Qasim Ali. A woman from the team was carrying a baby they'd rescued from the smoldering rubble. Prabaker translated the excited shout and chatter for me. 3 adjoining huts had collapsed in the blaze, falling on a family. In one of those inexplicable quirks of the fire's action, the parents of the child had suffocated and died, but the child, a baby girl, had survived. Her face and body were untouched, but her legs were severely burned. Something had fallen across them at mid-thigh, and they were black, split, and cracked. She was screaming in pain and terror. Tell them to come with us. I shouted to Prabaker. Lead me back to my hut, and tell them to follow us. I've got medicine and bandages. Prabaker had seen the large and impressive first aid kit many times. He knew it included bandages, salves, and creams, disinfectant solutions, swabs, probes, and an array of surgical instruments. Grasping my meaning at once, he shouted a message to Qasim Ali and the others. I heard the words medicine and doctor repeated several times. Then he grasped my sleeve and dragged me with him, jogging back to the hut. With the kit open on the ground in front of my hut, I applied local anesthetic cream to the baby's legs in a thick smear. It began to work almost at once. The baby settled down to a quiet whimper and cuddled within her rescuer's arms. Doctor, 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 people said, all around me. Qasim Ali called for lamps to be brought as the sun set on the Arabian Sea, and the long Bombay evening finally succumbed to warm, star-filled night. By the yellow flickering lamplight we tended to the wounded slum dwellers, using my first aid kit as the basis of our little open-air clinic. Johnny Cigar and Prabaker worked with me as translators and nurses. The most common injuries were burns, cuts, and deep gashes, but a great many people were also affected by smoke inhalation. Qasim Ali Hussein watched us for a short while, and then left to supervise the erection of emergency shelters, the rationing of remaining water supplies, the preparation of food, and the dozen other tasks that would fill the night to morning and beyond. A cup of tea appeared beside me. My neighbor Radha had made it and brought it to me. It was the first thing I ate or drank in the slum, and it was the best chai I ever tasted in my life. An hour later, she forced her husband and 2 other young men to drag me from the injured people to eat a meal of roti bread, rice, and bhaji. The curried vegetables were deliriously spiced, and I cleaned the plate with the last bite of roti. And again, hours later, after midnight, it was Radha's husband, Jitendra, who pulled at my arm and drew me into my hut, where a hand-crocheted blanket had been spread out on the bare earth. Unresisting, I collapsed on the blanket for my first night of sleep in the slum. 7 hours later, hours that passed as if they were minutes, I woke to see Prabaker's face hovering in the air. I blinked and squinted, and realized that he was squatting on his haunches, with his elbows on his knees, and his face cupped in his hands. Johnny Cigar was squatting beside him, on his left, and Jitendra was on his right. "Good morning, Linbaba," he said, cheerfully, when my eyes settled on his. "Your snorings is a fabulous thing. So loud, like having a bullock in this hut." Johnny said so. Johnny nodded his agreement, and Jitendra wagged his head from side to side. "Old Sarabhai is having a first-class cure for snorings," Prabhakar informed me. "She can take one very sharp pieces of bamboo, about same as long as my finger, and push it up inside of your nose. After that, no more snoring." Bah, Kalas. I sat up on the blanket, and stretched the stiffness from my back and shoulders. My face and eyes were still gritty from the fire, and I could feel that the smoke had stiffened in my hair. Lances of morning light stabbed through holes in the walls of the hut. "What are you doing, Prabhu?" I asked irritably. "How long have you been watching me sleeping?" "No, so very long, Lin. Only for the half-hours or so." "It's not polite, you know," I grumbled. "It's not nice to watch people when they're sleeping." "I'm sorry, Lin," he said quietly. "In this India we can see everybody sleeping, at some times. And we say that the face, when it is in sleeping, is the friend of the world. Your face is so kind when you are sleeping, Lin," Johnny Cigar added. I was very surprised. "I can't begin to tell you what this means to me, guys. Can I expect to find you in the hut, every morning, when I wake up?" "Well, if you really want, Lin," Prabhakar offered, jumping to his feet. "But this morning we only came to tell you that your patients are ready." "My patients?" "Yes. Come and see." They stood, and opened the door of the hut. Sunlight splintered into my burning eyes. I blinked, and stepped through, following the men into the brilliant, bayside morning to see a line of people squatting on the ground outside my hut. There were 30 or more of them forming a queue along the length of the lane to the first turn. "Doctor, doctor," people murmured and whispered when I emerged from the hut. "Come on," Prabhakar urged, tugging at my arm. "Come on where?" "First to toilet," he replied, happily. "You must make emotions, isn't it? I will show you how we make emotions, into the sea, on the long cement jetty. That is where the young men and boys make their motions, every morning, into the oceans. Motions into the oceans, isn't it? You just be squatting down, with your buttocks pointing on the oceans. Then you wash your good self with a shower, and you have it a happy breakfast. Then you can easily fix up all your patients. No problem." We walked along the length of the queue. They were young and old, men and women. Their faces were cut, bruised, and swollen. Their hands were blackened, blistered, and bloody. There were arms in slings, and legs in splints. And at the first turn, I saw to my horror that the queue extended into the next lane, and was longer, much longer. "We've got to do something," I mumbled. "They're all waiting." "No problem, waiting, Lin," Prabhakar replied, airily. "The people are waiting more than 1 hour already. If you are not with us, they would still be waiting, but waiting for nothing only." Waiting for nothing, that is what kills the heart of a man, isn't it? Now the people are waiting for something. Waiting for you, they are. And you are really something, Lin Shantaram, if you don't mind I'm saying it to your smoky face and sticking up hairs. But first, you must make it motions, and then washing, and then breakfast. And we have to get going. Some young fellows are waiting down there on the jetty, and wanting to see you make your motions. They what? Oh yes. They are fascinating for you. You are like a movie hero for them. They are dying to see how you will make your motions. And then, after all these things, you will return, and fix the patients, like a really hero, isn't it so? And in that way was my role in the slum created. If fate doesn't make you laugh, Carla said, in one of my first conversations with her, then you just don't get the joke. As a teenager I'd trained in first aid treatment. The formal course of study had covered cuts, burns, sprains, breaks, and a wide range of diagnostic and emergency procedures. Later, I'd earned my nickname, Doc, by using my training in CPR to pull junkies out of overdoses and save their lives. There were hundreds of people who only knew me as docent many months before that morning in the slum, my friends in New Zealand had given me the first aid kit as a going-away present. I was sure those threads, the training, the nickname, the first aid kit, the work as unofficial doctor in the slum, were all connected in some way that was more than accident or coincidence. And it had to be me. Another man, with my first aid training or better trained, wouldn't have been forced by crime and a prison break to live in the slum. Another criminal, ready to live there with the poor, wouldn't have had my training. I couldn't make sense of the connection on that first morning. I didn't get the joke, and fate didn't make me laugh. But I knew there was something, some meaning, some purpose, leading me to that place, and that job, at exactly that time. And the force of it was strong enough to bind me to the work, when every intuition tried to warn me away. So, I worked into the day. One by one, the people gave me their names and their smiles and, one by one, I did my best to treat their wounds. At some point during the morning, someone put a new kerosene stove in my hut. Someone else provided a metal box for rat-proof storage of food. A stool found its way into my hut, and a water pot, the ubiquitous matka, and a set of saucepans, and a few pieces of cutlery. As evening throbbed in a scarlet arch of sky, we sat in a group, near my hut, to eat and talk. Sadness lingered in the busy lanes, and memories of those who died receded and returned like waves moving on the great ocean of the heart. Yet carried on that sadness, a part of sorrowing itself, was the determination of those who'd endured. The scorched earth had been cleared and cleaned, and many of the huts were already rebuilt. Hopes rose with every humble home that was restored. I looked at Prabaker, laughing and joking as he ate, and I thought of our visit with Carla to the Standing Babas. One moment from that evening, one heartbeat's length of time as the crazed man had charged at us with a sword, was stretched in my memory. At the precise instant when I took that step backwards and raised my hands in a boxing stance to fight, Prabaker took a step to the side, and stood in front of Carla. He wasn't in love with her, and he wasn't a fighter. Yet his first instinct was to step sideways and protect Carla by shielding her with his body, while my first thought was to step back and fight. If the mad swordsman hadn't been tripped, if he'd reached us, I would have been the one to fight him. And, probably, I would have saved us. I'd fought men with fists, knives, and clubs before, and I'd won. But even then, even if it had gone that far, Prabaker would have been the real hero, for the bravery of that little, instinctive, sideways step. I'd grown to like Prabaker. I'd learned to admire his unshakable optimism. I'd come to depend on the comforting warmth his great smile provided. And I'd enjoyed his company, day and night, through the months in the city and the village. But in that minute, on my second night in the slum, as I watched him laughing with Jitendra, Johnny Cigar, and his other friends, I began to love him. The food was good, and there was enough for all. Music played on a radio somewhere. It was the fine, almost unbearably sweet soprano and happy, boasting tenor of a duet from an Indian movie. The people talked, nourishing one another with their smiles and conversation. And sometime during the course of that love song, somewhere in the landscape of the slum dwellers' reassurances, somehow through the fact of our survival, their world enfolded my life within its dreams, as gently and completely as a swollen tide closes over a stone that stands upon its shore. Part 2. Chapter 9. I escaped from prison in broad daylight, as they say, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, over the front wall and between two gun towers. The plan was intricate and meticulously executed, up to a point, but the escape really succeeded because it was daring and desperate. The bottom line for us, once we started, was that the plan had to succeed. If it failed, the guards in the punishment unit were quite capable of kicking us to death. There were two of us. My friend was a wild, big-hearted 25-year-old serving a life sentence for murder. We tried to convince other men to escape with us. We asked 8 of the toughest men we knew, all of them serving 10 straight years or more for crimes of violence. One by one, they found an excuse not to join in the attempt. I didn't blame them. My friend and I were young first offenders with no criminal history. We were serving big years, but we had no reputation in the prison system. And the escape we'd planned was the kind that people call heroic if it succeeds, and insane if it fails. In the end, we were alone. We took advantage of extensive renovations that were being carried out on the internal security force building, a 2-story office and interrogation block near the main entrance gate at the front wall. We were working as maintenance gardeners. The guards who pulled shifts in the area saw us every day. When we went to work there, on the day of the escape, they watched us for a while, as usual, and then looked away. The security force building was empty. The renovation workers were at lunch. In the few long seconds of the little eclipse created by the guards' boredom and their familiarity with us, we were invisible, and we made our move. Cutting our way through the chain-link fence that closed off the renovation site, we broke open a door to the deserted building and made our way upstairs. The interior was hollowed out by the renovation. Unplastered walls showed the skeleton structure of uprights and load-bearing beams. The bare, wooden steps on the stairway were white with dust and littered with fragments of brick and plaster. There was a manhole in the ceiling on the top floor. Standing on my friend's strong shoulders, I punched out the wooden trapdoor in the manhole and climbed through. I had an extension cord with me, wrapped around my body under my coveralls. I uncoiled it and pulled it free, fixed one end to a roof beam, and passed the other down to my friend. He used it to climb up into the roof space with me. The roof stretched out in zigzag waves. We scrambled toward the narrowing pinch of space where the roof met the front wall of the prison. I chose a spot on one of the troughs to cut our way through, hoping that the peaks on either side would conceal the hole from the gun towers. It was dark everywhere in the roof space, but in that narrow wedge near the wall it was blacker than a guard's baton. With a cigarette lighter for a lantern, we worked to cut our way through the double thickness of hardwood that separated us from the tin on the outside of the roof. A long screwdriver, a chisel, and a pair of tin snips were our only tools. After 15 minutes of hacking, scraping, and stabbing at the wood, we'd cleared a little space about the size of a man's eye. Waving the flame of the hot cigarette lighter back and forth, we could see the glint of the metal roof beyond the small hole. But the wood was too hard and too thick. With the tools we had, it would take us hours to make a man-sized hole. We didn't have hours. We had 30 minutes, we guessed, or maybe a little more, before the guards did a routine check of the area. In that time we had to get through the wood, cut a hole in the tin, climb out on the roof, use our power extension cord as a rope, and climb down to freedom. The clock was ticking on us. We were trapped in the roof of the security building. And any minute, we knew, the guards might notice the cut fence, see the broken door, and find the smashed manhole. Any minute they could come up through the manhole into that black, sweating cave, and find us. "We've gotta go back," my friend whispered. "We'll never get through the wood. We've gotta go back, and pretend it never happened." "We can't go back," I said flatly, although the thought had screamed through my mind as well. "They'll find all the broken stuff, the fence we cut, and they'll know it was us. We're the only ones allowed in the area. If we go back, we're in the slot for a year." The slot was prison slang for the punishment unit. In those years, that unit, in that prison, was one of the most inhumane in the country. It was a place of random, brutal beatings. A failed attempt to escape through the roof of the security force building, their building, the head office for the punishment unit guards, would ensure that the beatings were less random and more brutal. "Well, what the fuck are we gonna do?" my friend demanded, shouting with everything but his voice. Sweat dripped from his face, and his hands were so wet with fear that he couldn't hold the cigarette lighter. "I think there's two possibilities," I declared. "What are they?" "First, we could use that ladder, the one that's chained to the wall downstairs. We could go down again, break the chain off the ladder, tie the extension cord to the top of it, slam it up against the wall, climb up, and throw down the cord on the other side. Then we can slide down to the street." "That's it? That's the first plan." "But they'll see us," my friend protested. "Yeah, and they'll start shooting at us." "Yeah, they'll shoot us." "You said that." "Well, fuck me," he hissed. "I think it bears repeating. It's a fucking salient point, don't you think? I figure that one of us will get through, maybe, and one of us will get shot. It's 50-50. We considered the odds in silence for a while. "I hate that plan," my friend shuddered. "So do I. What's the second plan? Did you notice that buzz saw on the ground floor as we came up here?" "Yeah. If we bring it up here, we could use the buzz saw to cut through the wood." Then we can use the tin snips to cut through the tin. After that, it's back to the original plan. But they'll hear the thing, my friend whispered fiercely. I can hear them talking on the fucking telephone. We're that close. If we drag the saw up here and fire it up, it'll sound like a fucking helicopter. I know. But I think they'll just figure it's the workers doing more work. But the workers aren't here. No, but the shift at the gate is changing. There's new guards coming on duty. It's a big chance to take, but I think if we do it they'll just hear the noise, as usual, and think it's the workers. They've been listening to drills and hammers and buzz saws for weeks. And there's no way they could imagine that it's us doing it. They'd never figure that Crims would be crazy enough to use a power saw, right next to the main gate. I think it's our best shot. I hate to be Mr. fucking negative here, he objected, but there's no electricity in this building. They shut it off for the renovating. The only power point is outside. The extension cord is long enough to reach down there, I think, but the power is outside the building. I know. One of us will have to go down, creep out the door we busted open, and plug the extension cord into the outside power outlet. It's the only way. Who goes down there? I'll do it, I said. I tried to sound confident and strong, but there are some lies that the body just won't believe, and the words came out as a squeak. I scrambled over to the manhole. My legs were stiff with dread and tension cramp. I slid down the extension cord and crept down the stairway to the ground floor, playing the cord out all the way. It reached to the door, with plenty to spare. The buzz saw was resting near the door. I tied the extension cord around the handle of the saw, and ran back up the stairs. My friend pulled the saw up into the manhole and then passed the cord back to me. Once more I crept down to the door. With my body pressed flat against a wall, I breathed hard, and tried to find the courage to open the door. At last, with a heart-wrenching rush of adrenaline, I pushed the door aside and stepped out into the open to plug the cord into the socket. The guards, armed with pistols, were talking among themselves, not 20 meters from the door. If one of them had been facing my way, it would have been over. I glanced up to see that they were looking in every direction but mine. They were talking and walking about in the gate area, and laughing at a joke someone had just cracked. No one saw me. I slipped back inside the building, crawled like a wolf on all fours up the stairs, and dragged myself up the cord to the manhole. In the dark corner near the trough in the zigzag roof space, my friend lit the cigarette lighter. I saw that he'd connected the power saw to the cord. He was ready to make the cut. I took the lighter, and held it for him. Without a second of hesitation, he hoisted the heavy saw and clicked it to life. The machine screamed like the whine of a jet engine on a runway. My friend looked at me, and a huge grin tore his mouth open. His teeth were clenched in the smile, and his eyes were glittering with the reflected fire. Then he drove the saw into the thick wood. With 4 swift, ear-splitting cuts, he made a perfect hole that revealed a square of gleaming tin. We waited in the silence that followed, our ears ringing with diminishing echoes, and our hearts thumping at our chests. After a moment we heard a telephone ring close by, at the main gate, and we thought we were finished. Then someone answered the phone. It was one of the gate guards. We heard him laugh and talk on in a relaxed, conversational tone. It was okay. We were safe. They'd heard the power saw, of course, but, just as I'd hoped, they'd dismissed it as noise made by the workmen. Hardened, I punched a hole in the tin with the screwdriver. Sunlight from the free sky above shot in on us. I widened the hole, and then used the tin snips to cut a panel of tin around 3 sides. Pushing with 2 sets of hands, we shoved the flap of tin outwards, and I poked my head through the hole. I saw that we had indeed cut our way into one of the troughs of the roof. The deepest part of that V-shaped trench was a blind spot. If we lay down in that narrow defile we couldn't see the tower guards, and they couldn't see us. We had one job left to do. The power cord was still plugged into the outlet, downstairs and outside the building. We needed the cord. It was our rope. We needed it to climb down the outside of the prison wall to the street. One of us had to go down the stairs, push out through the door in full view of the guards in the adjacent gate area, unplug the power cord, and then climb back up into the roof again. I looked at my friend, his sweating face clear in the bright light bathing us from the hole we'd cut in the roof, and I knew it had to be me. Downstairs, with my back against the inside wall, next to the door, I paused again, and tried to will the strength into my arms and legs for the move out into the open. I was breathing so hard that I felt dizzy and nauseous. My heart, like a trapped bird, hurled itself against the cage of my chest. After a few long moments, I knew I couldn't do it. Everything, from judicious caution to superstitious terror, screamed at me not to go out there again. And I couldn't. I had to cut the cord. There was no other way. I took the chisel from the side pocket of my coveralls. It was very sharp, even after the work we'd done with it in trying to penetrate the wooden barrier in the roof. I placed it against the trailing power cord, where it entered under the door. I raised my hand to strike. The thought occurred to me that if I blew out the power by cutting through the cord, it could sound an alarm, and perhaps send a guard into the building to investigate. It didn't matter. I didn't have any choice. I knew I couldn't go out into the open again. I slammed my hand down hard onto the chisel. It cut through the cord, and embedded itself in the wooden floor. I swept the snipped ends of the cord away from the metal chisel, and waited for the sound of an alarm or the tumble of voices to approach from the gate area. There was nothing. Nothing. I was safe. I grabbed the loose end of the power cord, and rushed back upstairs and into the roof space. At the new manhole we'd cut in the roof, we secured the cord to a heavy, wooden bearer beam. Then my friend started out through the hole. When he was halfway onto the tin roof, he got stuck. For a few moments, he couldn't move upward and he couldn't move back. He began to thrash wildly, straining with all his strength, but it was hopeless. He was stuck fast. It was dark again in the roof space, with his body blocking the hole we'd made. I scrabbled around with my hands in the dust, between the roof joists, and found the cigarette lighter. When I struck it, I saw at once what had trapped him. It was his tobacco pouch, a thick, leather wallet that he'd made for himself in one of the hobby groups. Telling him to hold still, I used the chisel to tear a flap in the pocket at the back of his coveralls. When I ripped the pocket away, the tobacco pouch fell free into my hands, and my friend went up through the hole and onto the roof. I followed him up to the tin roof. Wriggling like worms in the gutter of the trough, we moved forward to the castellated front wall of the prison. We knelt to look over the wall. We were visible then, for a few seconds, but the tower guards weren't looking our way. That part of the prison was a psychological blind spot. The tower guards ignored it because they didn't believe that anyone would be crazy enough to attempt a daylight escape over the front wall. Risking a quick, frantic glimpse at the street below, we saw that there was a queue of vehicles outside the prison. They were delivery men, waiting to enter through the main gate. Because each vehicle was searched throughout, and checked with mirrors beneath, the queue made slow progress. My friend and I hunkered down in the trough to consider our options. "That's a mess down there." "I say we go now," he said. "We have to wait," I countered. "Fuck it, just throw the cord over and let's go." "No," I whispered. "There's too many people down there." "So what? One of them'll play hero, for sure." "Fuck him. Let him play hero. We'll just go over the top of him. There's too many of them." "Fuck them all. We'll go straight through him. They won't know what hit him. It's us or them, mate." "No," I said finally. "We have to wait. We have to go over when there's no one down there. We have to wait." And we did wait, for a 20-minute eternity, and I wriggled forward again and again to look over the wall, risking exposure every time. Then, at last, I looked down to the street and saw that it was completely empty in both directions. I gave my friend the signal. He scrambled forward over the wall and down out of sight. I crept forward to look, expecting to see him climbing down the cord, but he was already on the street. I saw him disappear into a narrow lane, across the street from the prison. And I was still inside, on the roof. I clambered over the bluestone parapet, and took hold of the cord. Standing with my legs against the wall, and the cord in both hands, my back to the street, I looked at the gun tower on my left. The guard was talking into a telephone and gesturing with his free hand. He had an automatic rifle slung over his shoulder. I looked to the other tower. The guard there, also armed with a rifle, was calling down to another guard inside the prison in the gate area. He was smiling and relaxed. I was invisible. I was standing on the front wall of the toughest maximum security prison in the state, and I was invisible. I pushed off with my legs and started the descent, but my hands slipped,